Hey everyone, it's Jananie and welcome back to my channel, The Story Ain't Over. So I feel like everyone sort of experiences this where you finish a book and you're like, oh my god, that was so good. I didn't see all these twists and turns coming. I didn't know I would feel all of these emotions. And at the end of it, you're just like, I wish I could read that book again for the first time and experience it exactly the way you did that first time reading it. And I feel like I have quite a few books that have given me that feeling over the years, and it's just impossible to replicate. But regardless, I thought it would be nice to tell you guys about the 9 different books that I wish I could read again for the first time so that you can go read them for the first time. I've mentioned so many of these books before on my channel, so you may have already read them, but I hope that for those of you who are new here or who need an extra push to pick up any of these books, this will be the video to find a new favorite. So the first book that I want to talk about is The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This is the first Taylor Jenkins Reid book I ever read, and it did not disappoint. I did read this quite a while ago, and it was around the time that it first started to get hyped, and for a good reason, because it is a fantastic book. And I think while reading this, I had so many emotions and just felt so hard for Evelyn, and I just really loved all of the characters. The reason I say I want to read this again for the first time is that I feel like I went into this for the first time not knowing too much about it and not knowing what I was going to get out of it. And so now knowing everything that I do and knowing how it ends and knowing some of the twists to it, I feel like I would have a different perspective on it reading it a second time versus reading it for the first time. But basically, for those of you who don't know, this book starts with one of our main characters, Monique, who is sort of this unknown magazine reporter, but who is given this like crazy opportunity to interview the reclusive Hollywood star Evelyn Hugo. She's like fictional. And so Monique goes off to meet Evelyn Hugo and does a super long interview with her where she's finally ready to talk about her very long life and, you know, the several husbands that she had along the way and her career and all of that. And she's getting to hear all of these secrets that no one knows. And so you think that this is going to be one thing, but it turns out to be something very different. And I just absolutely loved just like the experience of reading this book. I think it was just a fun read and also just a really interesting one. And it's definitely one that has stuck with me to this day and one that I often think about, and which is why many people love this one. So I definitely recommend this one if you are into Hollywood at all, if you are looking for a romantic read, if you are looking for something very heartfelt, this is definitely the book for you. All right, so speaking of heartfelt, the next couple of books are by the same author. So that's A Very Large Expanse of Sea and An Emotion of Great Delight by Tahereh Mafi. I absolutely love Tahereh Mafi's books, especially her contemporaries. Actually, I've only read her contemporaries now that I think about it, but I absolutely love these 2 books. I've talked about A Very Large Expanse of Sea so many times on my channel. I have like a 45-minute book talk for this one, so definitely go check that out if you want more thoughts on this. But I recently also read her newest book, An Emotion of Great Delight, and I absolutely love this one as well. And both of these I feel like are such raw emotional books that reading them for the first time, you just feel so many things and like you just want to know more and you just keep flipping the pages because you sort of relate hard to the character, or at least I related hard to the characters. And so I just wanted to know more and see where everything was going to go. And these are by no means happy books. They're very like slightly sad books or ones that have some very difficult themes to them. But I think that both of them are just so beautifully written as well and just so raw. I think like Tahereh Mafi has a way of like writing very sparsely and making sure that her point sort of gets across and like the emotions get across. And so in that way, I just loved both of them. This one deals with a young woman named Shireen in 2002, like just a year after 9/11. She's facing a lot of like hate and Islamophobia and racism. And she's dealing with that amidst falling for sort of the perfect boy, perfect white boy at her school, and how that relationship becomes like a sounding board for all of these issues in her community and all of that, and the, you know, issues that she faces as like this visibly Muslim woman with hijab and everything. So it was just a really interesting read, but it also was just like a really beautiful romance to it as well. I absolutely loved the romance in this book. It was just like so beautifully done. And by the end of it, I think I was just left breathless. And I think no like book ending has just like left me like that with that sort of feeling. And I feel like I don't know if I would feel that again rereading this. I think reading it for the first time and not knowing how it was going to end was just like giving me that extra feeling. So yeah, I really wish I could reread this one for the first time. And then same thing with An Emotion of Great Delight. This one deals a lot more with grief as like the main sort of theme, not only with like losing someone to death, but also losing someone because you like grow apart and like grieving a friendship and that sort of thing. And it was just a really, really interesting and powerful read. It's very, very short. And I think that the emotions of this book were what was just so strong, and the writing was just so beautiful as well. And I think this one also had a really breathtaking romance, and overall I just like loved it so, so much. And it also left me with like that sort of feeling at the end where it's just like, whoa. And it was just fantastic. And I think both of these, just because of the way that they're written with like so few words, where you like read a lot in between the lines, it makes for some really interesting prose. And I absolutely love them. And I wish I could reread them again for the first time and just like feel all those emotions again. But I think regardless, like rereading them a second time and like knowing what happens would still be great. But I think the not knowing of what's gonna happen adds to the emotion. All right, the next couple of books are also by the same author. So the first one is Legend by Marie Lu. So this is the first book in the Legend series by Marie Lu. And actually, I wish I could read this book, but also like the entire like first 3 books again for the first time, because I had such a wonderful experience reading this series, and it's to this day one of my all-time favorites. But I think the reason I picked this series specifically is because they have some just really great twists and turns, but they're also just really fast-paced, and not knowing what's gonna happen just like keeps you on your toes. But it's also got a really wonderful like slow burn romance that just like leaves you wanting so much more by the end of it. And I think the end of the 3rd book, Champion, for anyone who has read it probably knows it just packs a powerful punch. And I think by the end of it, I was just like sobbing uncontrollably because I just felt so hard for these characters. And this is a really long time ago when I read this. I think I read this in like high school, but I remember just like feeling all of these emotions in high school and just like wishing I could reread this again for the first time and feel all of those things again, like just how strongly I felt about them. So yeah, a fantastic series. This is sort of like a dystopian with 2 different main characters and 2 different perspectives. One is sort of this like thief, vigilante character named Day, and then the other one is sort of this cop character named June. But the 2 of them are starting to realize that things are a little bit wrong with the country or republic that they live in, and they're trying to find a way to right the wrongs going on. And it is a fantastic series, highly recommend. I didn't love the final installment that she added to the series later on, but I think the first 3 stand on their own very, very well. All right, the next book is also by Marie Lu, and that is Warcross. And I absolutely love this one. As you guys may know if you've been watching my videos for any amount of time, this is one of my favorite books, and I love it because it is like not only fast-paced, it has really, really great twists. Like there is like a fantastic twist towards the end of the book that I felt like I just did not see coming, and I was just so blown away by it. And then this also has a really wonderful romance. I loved the romance in this one, like it's one of my favorites. I think overall with all of those elements together, this was just a really enjoyable read with like really fast-paced elements, and then you just like get sucked into it. And I think I read this book like so quickly the first time. I think I read it within like a day or 2, and that experience of just like reading it and wanting to know what was going to happen next was just so exciting. And since then I have reread this, and while I did love like the reread and I loved like, you know, reading about the characters again and all of that, I think it didn't have the same magic that it had the first time, because you just know already what's going to happen when you have reread it. Whereas when you're reading it the first time, you don't know how it's going to end, you don't know the twist, and so you're just waiting on the edge of your seat trying to, you know, figure out what's gonna happen and making all the guesses of how it's gonna end. But basically, for anyone who doesn't know, this follows our main character, Amika Chen, who is sort of this bounty hunter in New York, and the world has sort of been swept up by this game called Warcross, which is like sort of this virtual reality thing. And the main love interest is Hideo Tanaka, who is this like really, really young, like billionaire guy in Tokyo who invented Warcross as like a teen. So when Amika accidentally glitches herself into sort of like a championship game of Warcross, she piques Hideo's interest. So he flies her out to Tokyo and asks her to catch a hacker who is trying to tear down the game. And there's like a big mystery going on there, and she finds herself, you know, added to one of the championships as a wild card, and she's holding this double identity as she goes along and sort of also falling for Hideo. And it was fantastic. Just highly recommend if you're looking for a fun, fast-paced read. All right, the next book is one that I've talked about so many times, and that is Anna K by Jenny Lee. I feel like this one was just so fantastic reading it for the first time because, one, you don't really know how it's going to end. Two, you have never met these characters before, so as you're learning about them, you just find them so endearing. And you also don't know how all the drama of the book is going to unfold. So in that way, I think it was just like really exciting to read the first time. But basically, for those of you who don't know, this is a sort of retelling, a modern retelling of Anna Karenina by Leo Tolstoy. And it has like a bit of a Gossip Girl element in the sense that these are all like these wealthy teenagers in New York. And you are seeing their different like romances unfold and the different relationships deteriorate or, you know, come together. And it was just so interesting. And I think I absolutely loved the love stories in this. Like there are multiple love stories going on with the various characters, but even just the main one I thought was just so interesting. And you're just waiting to see how it's going to unfold and if they're going to get to be together in the end. And I think that that was just really exciting. So I absolutely loved it. And I also love the way that it was written because it's written in this sort of like omniscient third person. So you're getting to be in everyone's head at some point, and it's just really interesting to see how each character views themselves or how other characters view them. And so in that way, I just really enjoyed it. All right, the next book is The Poppy War by R.F. Kuang, and for anyone who has read this, you probably know why I would love to reread this for the first time again, because this one is just full of so many unexpected twists and turns, and it just made for a really exciting read. And I think for this one, not knowing how it's going to end and not knowing all the twists that are coming and the way that certain characters will betray each other just makes for a really interesting read. Like going back to reread it now, I feel like knowing everything that happens at the end, like I would look at it very differently, whereas not knowing anything, I read it very differently. But yeah, I just love this book. And for those of you who don't know, it follows our main character Rin, who is this like young orphan, and she basically studies and gets herself into like one of the national exams and is determined to join the military academy and become like more of a powerful person. And then she gets involved with like the wars going on in her nation, and it's like a completely fantasy world, but it's inspired by a lot of Asian history. And so it had some really intense, like crazy stuff that goes on towards the end and some very violent things. And it's all based off of like parts of history. It has a lot of triggers as well, so be careful of that. But overall, such a good book. And I think just not knowing what's going to happen adds to so much of the excitement of this book. All right, the next book that I wish I could read again for the first time is Strange the Dreamer by Laini Taylor. And guys, I love this book so much. It's one of my favorite books of all time. And the reason is, one, because of the beautiful writing, but two, because of the very unique way that Laini Taylor has sort of imagined this world. I've never read a fantasy quite like this one, nor one that deals with these themes in this specific way or uses characters in this way. Like, I feel like this both had so much depth to each of the characters and like felt at certain points like a character drama as opposed to like a fantasy epic. But it also had these really interesting, mysterious elements that as you learn more about the world, you start to understand. And it was just so interesting in that way. And like it had some really exciting plot twists as well. But I think overall you just like love the character so much that you're just like so swept away by it. But I definitely think that this one also has like a really interesting ending with some twists that you do not see coming. And so in that way, I felt it was really exciting as well. So I feel like if I ever read it again, like knowing how it ends, I would look at it a bit differently. But another reason why I say I would love to read this again for the first time is because I felt like I had such strong emotions about just like hearing the first descriptions of some of the characters that it would just be so wonderful to experience that again. I think if I read it again now, like those descriptions would be just as powerful, but I think just hearing them for the first time is just so magical in some way. I don't know if I'm explaining that well enough, but I remember I just have such distinct memories of reading the first description of Laszlo and like how he pulled down this like big book of fairy tales and hit it on his nose and broke his nose. And that's just like an element of his character that like you just come to understand so well. And I just loved reading it. So yes, overall, a fantastic read. If you love fantasy, if you love very character-driven fantasies, this is definitely the one for you. All right, and the last book that I wanted to talk about is one that is probably obvious to many of you, and that is Six of Crows by Leigh Bardugo. If you have read this series, then you probably know why I would love to reread this again for the first time. And the main reason is all of the twists and turns, all of the plot twists that this book offers, because it is a heist book. So it is a fantasy heist in which 6 different criminals sort of come together to pull off this heist. And it was just so fantastic because you are going into it without knowing too much about the characters, and you are learning all of their various backstories as you go along and how that sort of feeds into what they're currently doing and the heist that they're trying to pull off. And so there are these different sort of twists that Evelyn Hugo works in, and it was just so fantastic reading it that first time. And I feel like if I read it again now, because I know how it ends and how things go, I would look at it very differently. But just reading it for that first time and not knowing how it's going to end, it just adds this like sense of thrill and like adrenaline, and you're just like so excited to just like learn what's going to happen next. And for that reason, I just love this book. Like, it was just so fantastic and just a phenomenal fantasy read. All right, but those are the 9 different books that I wish I could read again for the first time. I really hope you guys enjoyed this video. I think it's just so fun to look back on old favorites and just think about the first time you read them and like the memories you have associated with that experience, because I think it just shows you how good those books are because they've stuck with you this long. So yeah, I really hope you guys will pick up one of these books and, you know, find a new favorite and also fall in love with them while reading them the first time, just like I did. And I would love to hear from you guys if, you know, you have read any of these books and if you felt the same way while reading it the first time. But as always, thank you so much for watching. Go check out my Instagram, Twitter, and Goodreads in the description down below if you want to get regular updates on my reading. And I will see you in my next video. So please remember that this story ain't over. Bye!